The mystery of the abandoned arcade. In the summer of 1996, in a small town on the outskirts of Seattle, a group of teenagers stumbled upon a piece of history that would change their lives forever. Town, once vibrant with the hum of logging mills and bustling diners, had fallen into a quiet routine. But for Jake, Lisa, Tommy, and Sarah, the long summer days were anything but boring. They were an opportunity for adventure. It all started when Jake's older brother, who had just returned from college, mentioned an old, abandoned arcade hidden deep in the woods on the edge of town. The arcade, called Pixel Palace, had been the heart of the town's social scene in the 1980s. It was a place where kids would flock to play the latest games, compete for high scores, and just hang out. But in the early 90s, it mysteriously shut down overnight, and no one ever talked about why. Intrigued by the mystery, Jake and his friends decided to check it out. Armed with flashlights, a backpack full of snacks, and a handheld camcorder to document their adventure, the group set off on their bikes one hot August afternoon. As they pedaled deeper into the woods, the trees grew thicker, the air cooler, and the sounds of civilization faded away. Through what felt like hours, they finally stumbled upon the dilapidated building, its once bright neon sign now barely legible under layers of moss and grime. The doors were unlocked, creaking ominously as they pushed them open. Inside, the arcade was frozen in time. Dust-covered game cabinets lined the walls, old posters of 80s rock bands hung crookedly, and forgotten tokens littered the floor. But the strangest thing was that some of the machines still had power, their screens flickering faintly in the darkness. As the group began to explore, they noticed something odd. The games seemed to be watching them. High scores displayed initials none of them recognized, and some screens flashed cryptic messages. But what really unsettled them was the feeling that they weren't alone. Shadows moved in the corners of their eyes, and strange noises echoed through the empty arcade. Tommy, the tech-savvy one, decided to crack open one of the machines. Inside, he found something that shouldn't have been there, an old cassette tape labeled Property of X Industries. The tape wasn't an ordinary audio cassette. It was part of a prototype gaming system that had never been released to the public. Rumor had it that X Industries had been working on cutting-edge technology that could blend virtual reality with the real world. But the project had been abruptly canceled, and the company had gone under mysterious circumstances. The group decided to take the tape back to Jake's house, where his dad had an old cassette player. What they heard when they played it was a distorted mix of eerie sound effects, voice recordings, and what sounded like fragments of an interview. The voice on the tape mentioned Phase 2 and something called the Gateway, but it was hard to make out the details. One thing was clear, though: the tape was connected to whatever had happened at Pixel Palace. Over the next few days, strange things began happening to the group. Jake's dreams were filled with scenes from the arcade, but in his dreams, the games were alive, their characters reaching out to him. Lisa noticed that the initials from the high scores began appearing in random places around town, scratched into her desk at school, carved into a tree near her house, even written in the condensation on her bathroom mirror. The more they dug into the history of the arcade, the more they realized that Pixel Palace was more than just an entertainment venue. It was an experiment. X Industries had used the arcade to test their new technology on unsuspecting kids, blending the lines between the game world and reality. But something had gone wrong, and the arcade had been shut down to cover it up. Determined to uncover the truth, the group returned to the arcade one last time. This time, they were ready. They brought along a makeshift electromagnetic device that Tommy had rigged up, hoping it would help them interact with whatever was left behind. As they powered on the device, the arcade sprang to life in a way they had never seen before. The games started playing themselves, the lights flashed wildly, and a low hum filled the air. Suddenly, the screen of the largest game cabinet in the room, a massive machine called the Gateway, lit up, displaying a message: Phase 2 activated. The group watched in horror as the screen began to warp, pulling them in like a vortex. They tried to run, but it was too late. Each of them was sucked into the game, their surroundings dissolving into pixels and code. Inside the game, the world was a distorted reflection of their own town, but darker and twisted. They were no longer just players. They were part of the game itself, forced to navigate a series of increasingly dangerous challenges while being hunted by glitchy, malevolent creatures. As they fought to survive, they realized that the Gateway wasn't just a game. It was a portal to another dimension, one that X Industries had accidentally opened while experimenting with their technology. The only way out was to beat the game, but the Gateway was designed to be unbeatable, a trap with no exit. As they delved deeper into the game's levels, they discovered fragments of data left behind by the original test subjects, other kids who had been trapped in the game years ago. Some had gone mad, others had simply vanished. But there was one message that gave them hope: find the master code. Tommy, using his knowledge of coding and the clues they had gathered, managed to hack into the game's mainframe. He discovered that the master code was a backdoor created by one of the original developers, who had realized the danger of the Gateway too late. Code could shut down the game and free them, but it was hidden in the final level, a deadly labyrinth filled with the worst glitches and monsters the game had to offer. With no other choice, the group pushed forward. The final level tested their friendship, their courage, and their will to survive. But in the end, they found the master code, inputted into the system, and watched as the game world began to collapse around them. The next thing they knew, they were back in the abandoned arcade, lying on the floor, dazed but alive. The arcade was dark and silent, the machines finally powered down for good. They had escaped, but they knew they had been changed forever by the experience. As they left the arcade, they made a pact never to speak of what happened there. But the memory of that summer haunted them, and the tape, the one that had started it all, was buried deep in Jake's closet, never to be played again. Or so they thought. Years later, in the early 2000s, the town was shaken by a series of strange disappearances. And when Jake returned home for a visit, he found an old cassette tape sitting on his bed, labeled with the same mysterious initials. Past, it seemed, wasn't done with them yet. This story, set against the backdrop of 1990s nostalgia, is a blend of adventure, horror, and mystery, capturing the spirit of an era where the lines between reality and fantasy were starting to blur, thanks to the rise of video games and emerging technology.